Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for my client Lewis's vlog. And for those of you who are not familiar with Lewis's backstory, you can go watch the previous vlogs if you want to see it. He's a client I had. We built him up to early intermediate level. Then he got sick, he got hurt, had to have surgery, and then had a separate medical issue that prevented him from training for months, and he lost over 20 pounds of body weight during that time. So we've been rebuilding him back up, and we're now getting back to where he was. He's closing in now right at about a 2-plate bench. He was just a hair short there. He's now deadlifting more than 4 plates a side, and our squat is moving up, right? We're easing right up on the 4 plate per side squat. So he's finishing his noob gains back out again. We're easing very, very close into an intermediate, and I've got him bulking. And of course, we run him on a very basic conjugate template. He trains mostly at home. He is getting a new rack soon. He just moved. He's going to have room for a full rack coming up, so he's going to work on that. So what does his training look like on max effort day? Well, we did a normal conventional bench press just now. All right, so we're testing his classic lifts again. We're doing some pause bench for reps, chin-ups, rows, JM presses, lateral raises. Of course, this is quite a bit of total volume, and that's okay. We're okay with a lot of volume because he's not super strong yet. But we may come to a point to where some of this gets reduced a little bit, but we may not need to. As long as he's continuing to recover from it, then we're fine. But we are hitting all of our angles here, particularly because we've got a little bit of incline on the dynamic effort bench day. We're definitely working every muscle completely in the upper body on these days, with volume that puts us into that optimal volume for hypertrophy. And some people will say, well, hey, what about biceps? Well, he's doing chins and rows. So because he's doing both, I don't really feel the need to throw bicep work in. I'd rather work on his triceps. We do not, however, for a young man like this who does care about how he looks, more than some other people might, we do, of course, include lateral raises. And the reason for that is simply put, when guys use that term aesthetic, I'm not a massive fan of that, but when they use that term, that is what they're talking about. That look just means big shoulders and a low body fat. Outside of that, it's mostly genetics and other things. But if you just really work on your shoulders a lot and you get your body fat real low, that is what they mean by that look. That's the best way to describe how they train for it. So for max effort lower day, though, we did traditional back squat, and I don't recall the exact amount. It might have been 130, 135 kilograms. We're getting in close, but I have him stay very, very conservative with those squats because he's using these stands. And for people who say, well, he could just bail out of it, no, I don't like my lifters to ever do that. It's a very, very bad habit, and unless you're an Olympic lifter, don't do it. Don't bail by dropping the weight behind you. Especially if you have any idea that you might one day compete in powerlifting, or you might one day squat with a spotter. If you're ever going to potentially use a spotter at any point in your life, you cannot develop that habit. You're going to hospitalize someone. You're going to seriously hurt another human being. Of course, after that, we do good mornings, glute bridges. And those glute bridges, I kind of get on him about push progressing too fast because the range of motion is a little short on those in this workout. So I don't want him adding weight to that. I want him focusing on getting a little bit more extension at the top. And we do hanging leg raises and then single leg exercises. So we do, right now we're doing, I believe, dumbbell lunges. Because I'll rotate a lot of my people who don't have a lot of equipment. We'll rotate lunges, we'll rotate split squats, we'll rotate step-ups. Okay, depending on what we need there. So at this point, yeah, we're doing split squats still for him. So again, he's got his foot up on the back of a bench, and we just do all 10 reps. Lunges will tend to alternate and step backwards. But this gives him complete lower body development, even with basic equipment, with nothing more than dumbbells, barbells, bench and a rack. And we can still get pretty solid lower body development out of this, particularly with all the speed squats and speed pulls we do later in the week. All right, and of course we do max on deadlifts every other week. All right, dynamic effort upper day. We do flat bench for speed, compensatory acceleration around 50% of his max for 9 triples rotating grips. So we start with a really wide grip, and then we work our way in all the way to close grip towards the final sets, because we end up doing 9 triples with short breaks. Then he does incline bench, and I want most of my lifters, if they're going to incline, I'd prefer if they pause with it. He does chin-ups, and yes, I'm aware he can't do that many chin-ups yet, and that's okay. We get there over time, because we fill in the rest of the gap for that with rows, which you'll see here shortly. So after this, of course, we do JM presses to make sure his triceps get developed. But we're not as worried about pecs at this point, because his pecs are getting a lot of use, particularly on the dynamic day, because we do all that speed benching and then we do incline. Right, 3 sets of incline afterwards, his chest gets plenty of stimulation, even if it's a hair understimulated on the max effort day. But I would make the argument that it's not. It's still perfectly reasonable, because it puts our total weak inside that optimal range, and he's hitting a max bench first. It changes the efficiency of movements. It simply doesn't take as much volume to fatigue the upper threshold motor units and fibers if we're hitting really heavy singles before we do our volume. And again, there's actual data on this. It's not just opinion. It has data confirming it at this point in the game. There are studies on this. Then he does rows, and we finish off with some lateral raises just to make sure that his shoulders are finished off. And yeah, the laterals are the only single joint movement that we do right now. But they're a very, very good single joint exercise, even though we could argue oftentimes single joint movements don't always bring a lot to the table. Some are better than others. Lateral raises are really a phenomenal single joint movement, because even with a really light weight, so therefore our overall recovery is not so impacted. There's not a lot of axial loading. There's not a lot of pounding on the joints. It actually has an enormous amount of muscle fiber recruitment. If you think about the muscle fibers involved in it in the upper body, relative to the weight used, it's very, very high. So again, I count the lateral raise as a great exercise, even though it's such a tiny movement with a small weight due to the moment arms involved. The stimulus on it relative to just the amount of stress put on your joints is actually fantastic. So I highly rate the exercise. And I know for me as a strength coach and a power lifter, some people might laugh at that, but it's true. It's a great exercise. Then, of course, we do our dynamic effort lower, which is speed box squat, speed pulls, and then we do all the same movements we did previously, which you guys can see him finishing up here with, just doing some good mornings, and then we do all the other stuff afterwards. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.